Hello, welcome to the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. I am your host, Roy Kessel, and today we are very excited to have with us Peter Piscitello. Peter is with Play Like a Champion. He's the manager of outreach and operations support, and he's going to share more details about their organization. So, Peter, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Roy. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're excited that you made time for us and look forward to learning more about the great work that you're doing at Play Like a Champion. But before we get to that, and I want to kind of back up to your career and how you got started in sports, even from a young age, as as a kid playing sports, and what attracted you.
Yeah, well, I was the kid who played pretty much every sport I could. Some of them better than others, but I pretty quickly realized, even in junior high, high school, I remember thinking that I had a passion for the administrative side of sports, for providing sports for others and allowing others to enjoy it as much as I did. And originally, I thought that would be in college athletics. So after I graduated from a Benedictine college just north of Kansas City, went to graduate school, got into college athletics, kind of on the development business side of things, and really enjoyed it. But had an opportunity 10 years ago now, in 2010, to come back home and take over a CYO of Kansas City in Kansas, about 5,000 kids, your traditional youth sports league, and just fell in love with that from the get-go, and an opportunity to really serve kids in the community and provide youth sports, and was kind of humming along there. But that's where I was introduced to Play Like a Champion. We actually partnered with them to provide education for our coaches, and worked with them for a number of years. Had an opportunity here in 2017 to join them full time and work with partners across the country, and jumped at that. So I always it certainly started with playing sports, but I've been blessed to keep that passion alive throughout a career in different levels of sport.
So we know today things are virtual for people due to the pandemic and beyond. So where are you hiding out through all of this pandemic, and how are you handling the remote process?
Yeah, it's been thankfully easy for me. I'm in Kansas City, so we're kind of all over the country, and we work remotely. Even before the pandemic, we've got staff in Minneapolis, Chicago, St. Louis, Kansas City, and we were originally out of Notre Dame, so we have staff there. So that was actually a little easier for us in that regard, because we're used to doing that, working with partners all over the country. But the biggest thing probably is having to, you mentioned, holding up. Used to doing a lot more travel to meet with coaches and administrators in person, and sort of taking that virtual has been a bit of a shift for us and for me. But something we've been able to do over the last, I guess, 9-10 months now, and at least still be in platforms where we can see people on Zoom or whatever people are using, as opposed to maybe not in person like we'd like to be.
Yeah, I know it's been a challenging time for so many organizations. If you think about the concept of play,
Yeah.
right? Play usually means getting together in person and having the opportunity to interact with live human beings. We know that there's a lot of esports now. We know there's a lot of video games, and so that certainly fits within the play. But usually, somehow that's balanced. And I think the challenge is, as you said, it's been very different for people to figure out how to continue to engage the kids in their program. So tell us a little bit more, maybe start from the beginning in terms of Play Like a Champion, and give us the background on the organization.
Yeah, so Play Like a Champion started in 2006. Dr. Clark Powers, a longtime professor at the University of Notre Dame, primarily in moral education and development. His own sports experience really was what got him going, in looking at the world of youth and high school sports, and seeing some things that just had gone too far. The pay to play culture is something that was immediately an issue, and some of the disparities that can create. We can talk more about that, but also just the things we hear.
So you're telling us about the pay to play culture. I think that that's something that's really been a big problem across the country when you look at how expensive travel sports have gotten. Even the recreational version without the ultra competitive version, the prices have gone up dramatically. And so, as you worked with, as you said, Clark Power started this in 2006.
Mhm.
Um, what was the evolution and the acceptance at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely evolved over the last 15 years. And as I mentioned, we started with just a few partners, and it's grown quite a bit. But I think what we see today is there's really an understanding of some of the issues presented in youth sports, from the smallest schools to major organizations. And I think that's something that the more being a little more universal is something that's grown. We've seen a lot more large organizations, I would say, come on board as we've gone through the years, and understanding that, number one, we need to educate our coaches, we need to educate our parents. That's been one of our programs that has grown the most, has been our parent like a champion program, where the parents in youth sports realize, they kind of look around probably and realize, okay, I want what's best for my kids, and maybe we need to take a look at if we're really doing that, and how to do that, I should say, from a parent perspective. So, I think more coaches and more parents, we have, we do surveys of our parents and our coaches at the beginning and following our sessions we do with them, and more than 90% say that they'd recommend the program, and that they think it's necessary. So I think that number right there says that the vast majority of people out there, they see the problems, whether it's specialization, excessive pressure on kids, sports no longer being fun, or whether it's a more systemic, so to speak, issue like pay to play, where not all kids have the opportunity to participate, like maybe they used to. I think we're seeing more and more acceptance and understanding of that, and people wanting to know, how do they fix that?
Yeah, I think the acceptance and understanding is certainly grown, because of some of the ugly stories we've seen over the years.
Yeah.
But frankly, if you think back to it, right, this isn't a new phenomenon. This hyper competitive nature, the proverbial little league parent that was always such a problem. I think it's grown in awareness due to social media and the internet, and the story that made its way around a local community now makes its way around the world in a fraction of the time. um, so tell us a little bit more about the substance of the program, and kind of the how it works, and how you're able to implement that.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we do, and this speaks to your point, is empowering coaches and parents. I think that with social media and how quickly that information gets around, in terms of the negative stories, also the positive impact I think gets around. So we certainly focus on making our programs positive in that regard. Ultimately, what we do with our coaches, and that's our core program we started with, is we work with coaches. It's a 3 hour, practically speaking, it's a 3 hour session with youth coaches and a 4 hour session with high school coaches. And it's really focused on character development and some key approaches to building character through sports. We talk a lot about the whole development of student athletes. Certainly X's and O's are a huge part of coaching. If you're a sports parent, you want to make sure your kid's getting good skill instruction. But what we try to do is focus a lot on what goes on beyond that. We talk a lot about how you set goals. We talk a lot about building relationships. And if I had to pick sort of one thing that flows through everything we do in Play Like a Champion, it's that relationship piece. It's that community element of what we do. We're all in this together. And certainly if you're a coach, the relationship you build with your student athletes is critical, and the relationship they have with their teammates is critical. Maybe today more than ever, that is really important for people to understand, that sports can build a unity and a relationship that can really help kids grow and develop. So we talk a lot about that, the positive nature of coaching and the importance of coaches really focusing on being positive in a number of different ways. We give coaches practical advice in that regard, and talk a little bit about the why you need to do that, right? How kids respond better in certain situations. We talk about ownership quite a bit in terms of giving kids ownership over the activity, because that's something that's been missing. We've sort of taken the game from the kids and imposed our will as adults, when really it's about making sure the kids have fun and they learn some things. So those are the kinds of things we talk about. We do it all in the framework of character development. So we talk about coaches as character educators, right? We probably all folks listening to this podcast understand the role of coach as a teacher. But beyond just teaching the X's and O's, we have a responsibility really to talk about moral things and character development, and hopefully creating engaged and positive citizens, as well as just hopefully better athletes.
And it's interesting because typically creating better athletes is the first thing people want to do, and they often neglect the fact that creating that character, creating some of those other elements that you discussed are integral parts of becoming maybe not purely a better athlete, but certainly a better performer, a better teammate, um, more able to take the coaching, take the guidance that they're given as they progress through their athletic career. So, as an organization hears about the work that you do, what would the process be for them to get you involved with their organization or their coaches?
Yeah, I mean, generally, we're always happy to work with anybody. And a lot of people will come to us through our website, playlikeachampion.org, where they kind of just hear about us, or, have a friend who's been through our program. But we're really intentional. One of the things we try to do with all of our partners is make sure that it is a partnership, right? So, it's not just a product we somebody pays for, we hand over. It's really about working with somebody and saying, what do you need in your community? What are the issues that are really um, a big deal to you in this particular youth sports organization or this high school? And our programs are tailored to that. So it's something where we really pride ourselves on becoming partners and working together, to establish, okay, why is this needed here? And some places, some people we work with come to us because they have had a specific incident where they've had a coach or a parent or even a student athlete, unfortunately, be one of those stories on the news that you kind of mentioned before. But others, it's just a general awareness of, hey, we'd like to continue to educate our coaches and do some things here. So folks come from all places, but I think for us, it's so key to understand people, to understand where they're coming from, and to really fit what we do to what the needs of the community are.
So one of the first questions we get from every organization when they hear about terrific opportunities like this is sort of, what does it cost, right? What's involved with bringing Play Like a Champion to our community and to our, whether it's a school, high school, or youth sports program?
Yeah, it sort of depends a little bit. Not to give a cop out answer, but we have kind of a different pricing structure based on whether it's right now virtual, in person, certainly youth and high school, and what the needs are. I mean, we have a number of different programs. Some places add on student athlete servant leadership seminars and things like that. But overall, our goal has been to keep it as inexpensive as possible for people. So we kind of work on a case by case basis to some degree with that, in terms of what people are looking for. We talk about that with people when they come to us, and try to sort of determine how we can best fit within their community. But it's largely speaking, we've got a per coach cost and a per parent cost, that's pretty inexpensive when you look at what's out there. And we try to work with folks and make sure that we can work in their community and provide what they need.
Well, and I think one of the challenges that we always see in youth sports, and I saw it in a lot of the work I did in concussions, is none of the stakeholders want to pay for the support and the service, and it's always somewhat comical to me that the parents in travel hockey are going to pay more every week for rolls of hockey tape for their kids for their sticks or their socks, or similar types of things in other sports than they'll pay for a proper concussion management program
Yeah.
for their organization, more than the cost would be for the whole year,
Yeah.
right? They're paying more in a week of hockey tape. And I imagine it's a similar type of struggle here where the parents in the organizations, everybody wants the training and the coaching, and they see the benefit, but then, no matter what the price tag is, no matter how reasonable. So how do you go about raising money from your end so that you are able to reach out and help more people?
Yeah, we're blessed to have a really great network of folks who support us. It's funny. We're working with, I think it's 230 plus now organizations who, through the past year especially, have also been struggling. Right. That's no different. Any level of sport, the last year has been really difficult in terms of the ability to have sporting events and to bring in revenue, and even just to work with kids, right? That's doing that in person has not been possible for most people. So we certainly recognize that. We've been blessed to have some supporters and folks who have really supported us along the way. We also do events. Last month we did a great event in. It was virtual, of course, but really focused on the work we do in um, we call it a team for every child, but in two specific communities at this point. It's a relatively new program in the North Lawndale neighborhood of Chicago and in South Bend. And we did a fundraiser where most of the proceeds went to them to help support their programs, because at the end of the day, those are the kids who we're trying to make sure have opportunities. They're not in school for the most part, and when you can't meet in person for sports, that creates a lot of issues in some of these communities. So creating support for them is just as important to us as supporting sort of our own business. And so we've been blessed to sort of be able to navigate that through some events and working with folks. But there's always a need for more support for not only what we're doing, but also for all these youth sports organizations out there, and even the high schools where revenue streams aren't what they used to be.
Yeah, I think the challenge, right, in today's world is people have all of this uncertainty, which is never good for fundraising,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they don't know how long this is going to drag out, how long this is going to last. And so many businesses and companies and employees are struggling because their job prospects are either have ended or uncertain, and it makes it hard to raise money, but it actually amplifies the need that's out there for these services and for this training. Um, and so, in a given year, I think you mentioned about 230 organizations that you're working with. So, how many people are you training in that scope in a given year?
Yeah, it varies certainly by year. We've trained over 130,000 coaches in the Play Like a Champion approach, and obviously that's scaled up from our beginning. We were just working with a few partners. So 130,000 is that's a lot of people. I mean, that's over 1 million kids. If you think about a coach having 5, 10, if it's a football team, 30 kids maybe on a team. Um, it's really sort of humbling to think about the number of kids that's reaching. I would say, our normal target is could be 5,000 coaches a year, 5 to 10,000 coaches a year, but it just depends again on who we're working with. Sometimes, we've got a partner where working with a handful of coaches can be just as impactful as training, um, you know, hundreds of coaches. And I think with our approach, and if I didn't mention this earlier, we're so focused on doing during normal times, doing everything in person. That personal approach, those in-person clinics in a world where so much of it is, check the box online. And you talked about, I've done a lot of work with concussion management type stuff as well in the youth level. And unfortunately in that area, for a lot of people, it's okay, whatever, I'll check the box, but are they understanding how they how they take care of the kids in that regard? So I think for us, it's not even about quantity, although the more coaches, the better. But it's about having those effective partnerships. We use a train the trainer model. So, when we go in and we begin working with an organization, this helps actually cut costs as well. We'll come in, we'll do the initial training, and that's wonderful. But then we also train people who are on the ground in, Chicago or New York or Los Angeles or a small town in the middle of North Dakota. We train people who are on the ground who are going to be working with those coaches and administrators going forward to do the program, right? So that then they can work with coaches and parents and leaders in their community to continue to promote the development that we talked about. So it really is a team effort, and certainly something that continues to grow.
Yeah, that team effort is critical. And I really like the comment you made about the reach, because people often forget that when you're training coaches, if you're doing it well, you're really impacting, as you said, anywhere from 10 to 30 to 50 types of kids. Um, and I would argue it's even greater than that, because functionally, if a coach is trained, that training doesn't go away in a year, right? So they may coach 30 kids this year, but they're coaching 30 kids the year after, and the year after, and the year after. And certainly you need to reinforce some of those values and ideals, and keep things fresh with different ideas. But I love that model, and commend you guys on the work you're doing. So, when you look at the time that you've been with the organization,
Mhm.
what have you seen to be the biggest challenges in expanding the services that you have?
It's a good question. I think, you know, some of that is awareness, right? I mean, it's amazing. We're really proud of the number of partners we worked with and the great people we work with. But then you look at the whole landscape, and it's just a massive industry of sports, right? There's always thousands of more schools to work with, and everything else. So that's some of it. Um, you know, I think the biggest challenges in youth sports, and this will kind of help answer your question. We could go back to the pay to play piece, but just the disparities between the access that not only kids have, but also sports organizations have. So I believe it was the Aspen Institute and Project Play mentioned in the last few months the idea that only 1/3 of coaches have ever been trained, and in any kind of training. That's phenomenal that we entrust our kids as a parent, we entrust our kids to a coach, and we, I think, generally have a pretty good understanding of the value of sports and what it can teach. And yet 2/3 of coaches have no training. So in some sense, that remains a challenge, I think, for anybody that is working in youth and high school sports and in this sort of world, is not just an awareness of, hey, who we are and what we do, but of why this is necessary. And then once you get into communities, you mentioned obviously budget and revenue constraints and people fundraising, but also just within those communities, who has access to do this. One of the things we learned at the beginning of the pandemic very quickly, and inherently, I guess we knew this, but we do a lot of things in person. Well, when we had to shift to virtual, there's a large number of families out there that don't have laptops, that don't have access to a home computer where they can do a Zoom, right? And that became a massive issue in education in this country, as a lot of places went to virtual schooling. So in terms of short-term and long-term sort of challenges, that's one that we started working with coaches almost immediately last March to say, okay, how can we provide you with even the ability for you to stay connected to your kids? And that's something that a lot of people don't think about, is that kind of thing that really is a challenge when you're talking about training coaches and kids in this regard, is the ability to actually do that in a changing world.
Yeah, I think that connecting people is really something that's important. And as you said, a lot of us take for granted that we're sitting here, right, and we're in front of a computer. Our
Mhm.
Wi-Fi works, or mostly works, right? We
Yeah.
we get so frustrated we forget what it's like to not have it when you get a short period of time where it's not available, right? You're pulling out your hair for a half an hour where a system is down, or heaven forbid it's a whole day and you feel like your world's upside down. But as you said, for many of these kids and many of these organizations service communities where that's not the case, or there's multiple kids at home and there's only one computer, and so they're not set up to really go through the school day in a virtual environment. And the idea of sports, to a large extent, is to get people up and moving and do
Mhm.
something different than just sitting down in school. Like, I used to love sports because you would get away from sitting at a desk and be able to run around and do something. And I can't imagine how I would have survived as a kid trying to do virtual school, and then not only that, but now you can't go and play your team sports and everything else that you love.
Yeah, without a doubt. I could tell you a couple of great stories in terms of situations we've dealt with in that regard. I mentioned almost immediately we heard from our coaches in our community that um, finding a solution to that was critical when kids were at home. So I think our first step was how do we keep folks communicating, right? And we really worked with our coaches on strategies to communicate, whether it's youth sports or high school sports. How are you effectively communicating with your athletes to just keep them in the loop? And then beyond that, of course, how do you keep them moving? And that might look completely different if you're a varsity, high school basketball player versus a, 5-year-old soccer player. But we tried to provide strategies for everything. So we created a page. It's still up on our website of different. We just pulled from everywhere, all over the internet, to find resources for moving. You can actually still find that on playlikeachampion.org if you're interested. A lot of people have seen that stuff, we just tried to pull some of the best resources for keeping kids moving. We hosted a virtual summer camp, and a lot of our partners did the same thing locally to say, how do we give kids half an hour to an hour a day of movement, and here's an activity you can do with somebody on the screen, or we made it so it was on demand, so you could do it anytime that they sort of had access to a device with their parents. And stuff you can do with what you have at home. How do you roll up socks into a soccer ball if that's the only thing you have, and do a drill? So I think that's all really critical. But even you mentioned at the beginning of this esports, sort of offhand, we have our partners in Los Angeles CYO, working with, I think it's 20,000 kids or something to that effect, that have been shut down, right? Because of where that ordinance has been. They created an esports league, but we worked with them to add movement, right? So in addition to competing in the esports format, which obviously has grown, leaps and bounds in the last decade, the kids are also asked to go do a half an hour of activity in between gaming sessions. So, even in that environment, which traditionally isn't movement oriented, we tried to find creative solutions, and that wasn't our idea. All credit goes to their executive director, James McGoldrick, for doing that. But he even expanded that beyond Los Angeles to other partners around the country, and have had some real good success with that. So some creative, unique ways to do that, but it continues to be difficult.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it looks like this current time of year is going to continue to be virtual, at least probably for the first half of the year. Um, but as we come out of this, I think one thing that's going to be positive is really the fact that we now are going to have the ability to take people and look at things differently, where don't necessarily have to have everything in person. There's challenges. You identified some from a technology standpoint, but there's equally challenging or more challenging issues with transportation for many kids in
Yeah.
terms of getting to
Mhm.
the events, the practices, the games, the participation. And so they're stuck at home. Maybe they have a computer, but they can't get anywhere, and so developing these virtual inventory of activities and mechanisms to participate, I think, is going to be a positive change in the long run.
Yeah, I hope we've gotten a lot better at communicating. At least we've understood in our sort of sports world. I think there's no question that as a society we probably have a greater appreciation for sports and not taking some things for granted. Um, but also just that ability, having to go the last 10 months with learning, basically relearning in many cases how to communicate with each other. Hopefully, there is a real benefit going forward to, I talked about relationships earlier, coaches and administrators understanding how we can create more opportunities for kids by communicating, by understanding the different ways we can do this, and being creative. Transportation, you mentioned, is a major issue. Maybe that's something that's come to the forefront even a little more now, and we can use that and what we've learned over the last year to move forward and do so in a way that's brings in more kids and is more effective in reaching them.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that that reach is important in keeping people active when you look at the overall cost of obesity and the impact that has on society and the lack of movement. It seems to be something that's gotten worse and worse as we've become more technologically advanced and haven't had to sort of do the physical manual labor on the same scale and scope that it was in earlier generations. What's going to be interesting to me is to look at, you take things like your program and working with the coaches, where does that go, after Corona's done?
Mhm.
What's the next step? And when you look out on the horizon for a 3-year window, what are some of the things that you see coming along?
Yeah, for us, I think really the emphasis, even before coronavirus started, has been this. I mentioned to play like a champion, our A Team for Every Child initiative. And it's really providing access. I think that's the next frontier in all of youth sports, really, is providing access for kids who otherwise don't have it. We obviously continue to do our coach training, our parent training, and we look forward to resuming that in the places where there haven't been sports for the past 9 months. But I think as more people, as I just mentioned, even understand the benefits of sports, we really have to work together as a community, as a nation, to make sure that all kids have the opportunity to participate. And that's what that program has been about for us. I mentioned a little bit prior that we work in two communities right now that we've just got up and running in the last couple of years, North Lawndale in Chicago and South Bend. But our goal is really to grow that by leaps and bounds and to get into any place where kids don't necessarily have the access to underserved communities, communities where it's not possible to have financially to have um, a large scale youth sports operation, right? What we do in these communities is work with a lot of small individual organizations who have been done a great job of pulling in kids and and get them to work together. And really, we talk about the idea of kinship. We're all in this together, and being a community. And I think the power of communities coming together to do that kind of thing, to say, okay, who's missing, what kids are not involved, whether that's we've seen scenarios where sure there's 80% of boys in a school or in a neighborhood are involved, but there's very little girls involvement. So we've been able to increase the involvement of girls in sports in certain neighborhoods. Whether it's, a lot of it is income, household income. Statistically, that's the biggest barrier to entry for youth sports. So I think working together to come up with solutions to that and make sure that all the kids who want to play have an opportunity to do so. That's where we need to go, as we come out of this.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how things evolve and develop, and there's always changes. You're never going to, nor do we want to, eliminate the competitive nature of sports. That's what
Sure.
makes sports
Mhm.
fantastic, right? There might be ways to um, minimize some of the drama that we'll call the excess competition levels create. But I think that those are a byproduct in getting kids overall more active and involved in different sports where they're not wrapped up, even from just a self identity perspective, of having everything tailored to one sport, and everything is locked in. Like if you make it in basketball, you're good, but you don't have anything else going
Mhm.
on. And especially at an early age, that's personally one of my pet peeves, is looking at how early they start all of the elite travel sports, and the kids haven't even had a chance to really sample enough different types of sports and see what they have. And part of that sampling ties into coaching, because you're going to then have a sampling of coaching styles from different sports, and not be necessarily locked in with one program that kind of leads you, up the ladder to high school sports. So, uh, you know, you guys have done an amazing job. I want to congratulate you on everything that you've accomplished. Tell our audience how people can help. What's the best way for people to touch base with you and to reach out to Play Like a Champion and see what they're able to connect?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the easiest way is just visit our website, www.playlikeachampion.org. Pretty easy to remember. And there, we're on all the social media platforms. You can find those links there. You can email us, call us. We'd love to talk to you, and figure out how we fit in, right? Whether you're looking for coach education, whether you're in a community where you feel like, there aren't opportunities for kids, whatever way we can help, that information's on our website, some of the things we do in our programs, but also connect with us through that. And we'd love to talk to you. We love working with new partners.
Well, Peter, before we let you go, we want to put you on the spot for a minute here, and we're going to wave our sports philanthropy magic wand, and we're going to point you as a commissioner of one of the sports. So you have a choice now of what sport you want to take over.
Oh, that'd be tough. I'm a fan of all kinds of sports. You know what? I'll go with soccer. Whether that's sort of global soccer, if I can make myself the leader of all soccer, or just domestically the MLS here. I'm a big soccer fan, so we'll go with that.
Well, so now we're going to give you that. We're going to give you the higher power of FIFA, and you have
Okay.
control of the whole soccer world. Um, Give us an idea of something you'd like to see changed in soccer, whether that's an on-field competitive rule or something in the kind of the policies and the landscape of the soccer community.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a soccer fan, there's probably a lot of things that could be changed in the sports. Certainly competitive balance is one of the things that comes to mind globally. Where the level playing field for clubs with different finances. But I think I'd probably go back to, maybe just based on the work I do and what I'm passionate about. The youth level. I mean, somehow we've taken a game in soccer where it literally takes only a ball, and where some of the best players in the world grew up, not even having a ball, but wrapping together socks, as I mentioned, or anything to play in the streets and play soccer. And we've made it this, multi-billion-dollar industry, where you've got to pay thousands of dollars to be on a team, particularly in this country. So I think working with, leagues and organizations to help make it as accessible as possible, and frankly as popular as possible. We've got, in America, probably still the issue is, as popular as youth soccer is, of some of our best athletes, playing other sports and never really giving soccer a thought. So thankfully, there are some people I know here in the United States working really hard at how to make sure soccer stays fun, and it's not just about, you know giant travel tournaments and paying a bunch of money, but it is about the creativity and the fun of the game at the youth level. Just playing around with a ball at your feet, uh, and trying to see how you get it in that goal. I think there could be some real positive work done to return it to its roots a little bit, and bring back some of the beauty of the game.
Well, soccer is a beautiful game. I know I played from a young age, or at least young when I was a kid, which was U8. My
Mhm.
son started
Yeah.
playing at 4. Um, it's a different environment, but I think you're right where that over structuring of what goes on um, makes takes away some of that creativity. Things are too scripted in a sense. The program and the drills and the technical skills obviously the development from that level is light years ahead of what it was when we were young. But at the same time, I think you've taken away. The old days you used to sit and try and juggle a ball and see if you could
Yep.
juggle it 10 times when you were a kid, and you would get a reward from the coach. Or we used to sit in the corner taking free kicks or corner kicks and trying to curl them
Mhm.
into the goal, and
Yep.
just seeing if you can do that even without a goal. It's not an easy process, but you don't see kids just out playing very much. It's most of everything is structured when they're not with their team. You don't see a lot of pickup games in the streets. I grew up across the street from a school, and after school, it'd be like, yeah, roll the ball out, and whoever shows up plays. And maybe you have goals, maybe you don't. You use a couple. We didn't even have cones. It was just t-shirts or
Yep.
socks or
Yeah.
your shoes instead of the cleats. Um, and that was where it became fun because you didn't have all of that structure. And I think that's something that's gone on in a lot of sports in
Yeah.
today's world, where the play has been taken out. So I love the play like a champion mantra. I think that that's fantastic. And Peter, I want to thank you again for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's been fantastic to chat with you, and love all the work you're doing.
And to our audience, we appreciate you joining us for the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. This is your host, Roy Kessel, signing off for today. Don't forget to live generously.